You might sometimes run into a case where you get a wire cut in the field and all of a sudden half your lights stop working. So from this point to this point, or you have 4 or 5 lights that just quit working. You didn't put in the system, you have no idea where the wire is running. Well, there's 2 things you can do. One, you can spend your whole afternoon trying to find out where they ran the wire to which lights and all that, which I get called all the time to do. Or the smarter thing that's going to save you a bunch of time is really just find that last light that's working, and I would recommend just running a brand new wire to the next light that's not working, and typically that'll fix your issue and it'll save you a bunch of time. Hey guys, Cal from the Lighting Doctor here. Thanks for watching. We're going to show you some more great landscape lighting tips. Hey guys, I just wanted to show you an example of an in-ground light. We've kind of got a cool little barbecue pit area here, and where you're going to use an in-ground light a lot of the time is if you really want to hide that light source, or you don't want it to be in a high traffic area. So for example, right next to a barbecue pit here, we've got this cool oak wine barrel that we really want to go and highlight, but I don't want to have a fixture sticking out of the ground. One, that I'm going to see, and two, that have a possibility of tripping over near the fire pit. So that's where you probably can't even see it from there, but we've got an in-ground light built right in the ground here that we've dug and we concealed in there. The nice thing about that is you can still angle the lens within that in-ground light a little bit, so we've kind of got it shining on our oak whiskey barrel so it stands out at night. And I'll show you a couple other really cool areas where we've kind of used those, and you can use a combination of lights to get a nice effect. But the in-ground lights are also good if we had to bring that light back a little bit into the grass and we didn't want to have to weed trim around it and mow around it. That's where those are nice, because you can sit them flush in the grass. They sit 100% level, so you can just mow right over it. The only time you might have to do a little maintenance is maybe if you've got some leaves and stuff accumulated on it, you kick them off. But other than that, in-ground lights can be a very effective tool, especially if you have those larger trees and you need to get your lights a little bit further back and you don't have a bed around them and you're going to have to put them in the grass. I would highly recommend using a good in-ground light. That you can go and find those. Search in-ground light or well light on lightingdoctor.ca, or go to YouTube and search Lighting Doctor in-ground lighting, and we'll show you all kinds of examples of stuff you can use. So I want to show you an example here and distinguish when do you use an uplight and when do you use a wash light. So one thing I will say is with an uplight, an in-ground light is going to do pretty much the same thing. It's going to give you the same effect. And in a case like this, we actually have an in-ground light here. And the reason being is because we didn't always have this bed around us. This used to be a grass area, so this light was actually right in the grass. So we didn't want to have something sticking out like out of the ground that we were going to have to trim around and stuff like that. So we actually put an in-ground light, and we just haven't come around to changing that yet. So we used an in-ground light, but we're going to get the same effect. It's just a matter of a maintenance thing. In-ground lights are more expensive because they have to live in the ground. They have to be able to hold out water better, so that's why you pay more for them. But now, when would you use a wash light and when would you use a uplight? So here's an example, and this is probably one of my favorite things to do, is take advantage of shadows on different features. So we have this nice brick wall in front of us, and I'll show you another example too, but whenever I have something like this, it's nice to go and highlight it, but if you can take it another step further and actually highlight whatever you have in front of it against the brick wall. What's cool is this is just some tall grasses. We're not super fancy. There's not much to see. Sometimes it'll be a small shrub. It's not an overwhelming feature to go and highlight, but what we can do now is, especially with a wash light I like to use in a lot of cases, and especially if it's a wider, smaller shrub, is actually go and place this in front of that small structure, so that not only are we highlighting the grass, but then we're creating all kinds of cool shadows against this back wall. So we're highlighting the wall, we're highlighting the plant, we're creating shadows, we're doing a bunch of stuff with one light, and it's a great way to get more bang for your buck. Now, when would I do that same scenario and use an uplight? Well, now if I had, say, again, a nice feature like this, and I had like a taller tree, just to my right I have like a small apple tree, but if that apple tree was right here, I would do the same thing. I would use an uplight so that I can get that light further up into the canopy, but also cast some shadows back onto the nice wall and the nice feature I have here. So that's really the difference, is when you would change and use these differently. If same thing on this brick wall that we have, it's not overly high. I mean, it's not even 6 feet high, so there's no point in using a light like this. It's going to be shooting light 15-20 feet up in the air, because really we're just going to be wasting all that. Whereas a wash light, you know, after 6 to 8 feet, it really disperses, so you're really maximizing the ability of that light. Now, another thing I wanted to point out, just as I'm kind of here, is same thing on a house. I talk a lot about highlighting the architectural features of your house, and say you have some nice brickwork, some nice stonework, whatever it is. One of the common mistakes I see a lot of people, a lot of landscapers do, is they'll take their, whether it be an accent light or a wash light, they'll bring it way far back from the house and they'll shine it at the house. And then what it does, it creates a big hot spot on the wall. And what you really want to do is you want to get that a lot closer. You want to get it somewhere in this vicinity, call it, you know, 8 inches to maybe 24 inches back, depending on how bright that light is and how high you need it to shoot. If you have a really tall house and you need to get that light 35 feet high, you're going to have a brighter light in there, so you're probably going to have to bring it a little bit further back so that you don't create too much of a hot spot here. But you're almost always better off, like I talk about even with some of the tree lighting, is get that light a little bit closer, use your adjustments, and angle that light more upright than towards the house. It's always a good rule of thumb is whatever angle you think, you probably want to angle it up just a couple clicks higher, just to make sure that you're really getting the best effect out of that light. But if you're in the same scenario, and say this was a stone portion of the front of your house that you wanted to highlight, but it's only about 4 or 5 feet high, that's where I would do the same thing, but I would use a wash light now, because it's not going to be as bright, intense of a light, and it's going to create a really nice effect without a lot of glare and a lot of hot spots. So that's really the difference when I would use these. Same thing, almost any time I'm doing a tree over 6 feet tall, I'm using something like this. If I'm doing a bush or a shrub that's wider, that's not super high, I'm probably going to use a wash light. Mounting your transformer, another question I get all the time. In this case, we've just mounted it straight to the house, straight to the structure. This is a part of the house that nobody really sees. It's well enough hidden. We have our outlet, and it's solid enough. I don't have to worry about drilling through concrete or anything like that. So in this case, we just mounted it directly to the house. Try and keep it about 12 to 18 inches above the ground, just because, not that they put out a lot of heat, but they can put out a little bit of heat, and you just want to keep that, you know, above the ground. But if you don't have that option, or it's your house is concrete, or you don't know what's there and you don't want to be drilling into the house, which I hate drilling into houses unless I know what's there. Usually what we'll do is I'll just go get a nice 4x4 cedar post, because I know it's going to last. I might go to the deck section in my home improvement store and get like a nice little cap for the top of my 4x4 post. I'll dig that in a bit, bury that in, and then I'll just mount my transformer to that. And the reason I like doing that too is because then if you ever decide to move your transformer, you're not having to worry about patch up holes in your house. So a simple 4x4 post is a nice way to go and mount your transformer. It's clean, it's easy, and it just eliminates you having to drill more holes into the side of your house. So how do you select the right size transformer for your project? It's really easy, as long as you're using a good, efficient LED landscape light. Basically what you do is you take all your lights. So I'm going to say, for example, I've got 20 uplights, and they're all 5-watt LED lamps. Now the only thing to keep in mind is that the cheaper the quality of the light, the less you pay for it. There's something called their VA, which is basically their efficiency of the light, which if it says it's a 5-watt bulb, the cheaper quality of the light is, it's actually going to be using closer to 10 watts. Sometimes I've seen as high as double the actual wattage. So you want to be careful. If you're saving money on lights because you're buying something off Amazon or in Home Depot, just be aware you want to definitely size your transformer much bigger. If you're using a good contractor grade or professional light, you allow for maybe 20% extra of that VA. So a 5-watt light might be using 6 watts, maybe 7 watts. So always plan for that. Any of the good lights are going to tell you that. They're going to give you a VA on the box, which is going to tell you what you should actually plan your transformer for. So let's say you're looking at our standard RS uplight was a 4-watt LED bulb, which only uses about 4.2 watts, but let's say it's 5, just to keep math simple. Say we've got 20 of those lights. 20 times 5 is, we have 100 watts. So the only thing we want to do is just make sure we size our transformer a little bit bigger than that, so that we can add on later, and just in case there is any inefficiencies, we have a little bit of room. So we'll usually, size it maybe 20% larger, just to be safe. If you know you want to add more later, then just go a little bit bigger than that. But basically that's it. The reason that you still see a lot of 600, 900 watt transformers out there, again, is because there's still a lot of, I'll call them old school guys that still install halogen lights where you needed those bigger transformers because there was just so much wattage with all the lights that are on the system. If you're using a good LED system, I'm going to tell you that you probably don't need anything bigger than 300 watts, because if you're putting that many lights on, you're probably going to be spread out so far that you're going to want another transformer anyways. So we basically carry two models. We carry a good stainless steel 150 watt and a good stainless steel 300 watt. That's it. It doesn't matter if you use a 300 watt and you only put a couple lights on it. It's really not going to affect your system that much. You just probably don't need to spend the extra money to do that. But if you wanted to, and future expansion, all that kind of stuff, you definitely can. Anything that's under 100 watts, I'll tell you right now, there's not a lot of good options. There's a lot of econo transformers that we actually used to sell some of them, and not that they were bad, but I know they don't last. We've quit selling anything that we get called out to repair or replace all the time, and that's why there's a very limited number of fixtures and products on our website, because I don't want to sell you guys the garbage that I know is just going to break down. So we're going to give you, the best of the best, the quality that's not going to break your bank account, but that we know is going to last. But basically, in short, that's how you size your transformer. Add up the wattage of all your lights, and then just make sure you size that transformer about 20% higher. The less efficient, the cheaper the light, size it a little bit more. All right, guys, I'm going to answer one of the questions I get all the time is about transformers. So in this case, is a relatively big project. Not that we had a lot of lights. I mean, we probably only have 80 to 100 watts of lights, which, is call it, we probably have 18 to 20 lights in total on this transformer. So it's sized big enough because this is a 300 watt transformer. So it's more than adequate for the size that we need. The reason we did that in this case is that we want to allow for future expansion. The other reason that we did that is because anytime you get a slightly larger transformer, so for example, this is a 300 watt multi-tap transformer, so it has multiple areas to put the wires in, and this used to be a lot more of a concern or a bigger issue when you were dealing with halogen systems, because you had to be real precise with the amount of voltage that each light was getting to get that to work properly. They had to be between 11 and 12 volts, so you really had to calculate out all your voltage drop and all that kind of stuff. With LED systems now, that's not really the case, because if you're buying any good quality LED lighting fixture, they're going to generally operate between 10 and 15 volts, which means there's a large gap of voltage drop that you can allow in there. And the way that we kind of justify that, or the general rule of thumb that we always talk about, is if you have a transformer like this that has a 15 volt tap, you always want to put your longest run on there so it allows for the most voltage drop. But you can run 100 watts of lights on 300 feet of 12-2 cable without having enough significant voltage drop to affect those lights. So for example, this one, we easily probably ran 350 feet of cable way out there. We started our 15 volt tap and we have no issues with lighting. On this entire project, we probably ran over 2,000 feet of 12-2 low voltage direct burial cable. And I would say if you're doing a project on your own, use at least 12 gauge. You're going to save a little bit of money going with a 14 or 16 gauge, but then you limit the ability to add on to that system later. So just use 12-2 wire. It's rare that you're going to have to go bigger than that. This is a 7-acre property and we didn't even have to use anything bigger than 12 gauge. We've got 3 separate transformers around the property. So if you are dealing with a property that size, then I would probably just say just add some multiple transformers. That's not always the case because you might not have power, so you might have to use bigger cable. But I'm telling you, to date, I haven't done a project big enough that we've had to worry about that, and we've been lucky that we've always had power supplies, but it's not something you're really going to have to worry about. But just to clarify, so when you're using the multi-taps here, when to use those or when you want to use those is, say for example, now I've got a long run going out there and we're going to come back in the fall, we're going to add some more lights, but they're going to be closer to the house. I could just connect them to that old wire, or I can just use another one of these taps and I can run my wires from there. So that's why you have the multiple taps. If you are worried about voltage drop, always use the larger tap to run your longest runs of wire. On some of our smaller transformers that are 150 watts, they'll only have two terminals. They'll have for your common and your 15 volt tap, and that's it. And I always get asked, well, can I have more than one wire running into that, because I have lights out that way and I have lights out that way? I want to make two separate runs. And the answer is yes. On those transformers particularly that we carry, you can have up to 3 runs, 3 wires that will fit up into those terminals that you can run out in 3 different directions. And what that does too is that helps split, as long as you're under the wattage of the transformer, so under that 150 watts, then you can run 200 feet of cable this way, 200 feet of cable that way, and both of those cables are starting at 15 volts. So even if you lose voltage along the way on this side, it's not going to affect this side. So you can do that, and you can have, literally, you can have 600 feet of cable. You can have 300 feet out that way, 300 feet out that way, and as long as the amount of lights is under the total wattage of the transformer, you're not going to run into those voltage drop issues. So that's another reason why it's not as big a concern when you're dealing with LED. So another question I always get asked about low voltage wiring and transformers and all that kind of stuff is polarity. Does it matter? Do I have to have the same cable going to each light? And the answer is no. Basically, as long as you have one wire in your common tap and one in your voltage terminal, whether it be a 12 volt terminal or 15 volt terminal, it doesn't have to be consistent throughout the run. As long as each one of those fixtures has 2 of those wires going to it, that's all that matters. And really, polarity is not an issue when it comes to low voltage lighting. So in short, do you need to really worry about polarity? No. So I wanted to also talk about making your controllers Wi-Fi really cost effectively, and also running multiple zones. There is transformers out there where you can have one transformer that runs, say, a zone for your front and a zone for your back. In all honesty, they're pretty confusing to work, and they get quite expensive, and there's some limitations and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to tell you a real cost-effective way of doing that, especially if you only have, like, say, a front yard and a backyard zone, is if it doesn't matter, then just run them all off the same transformer. But if you want to control them separately, front yard, backyard, with simple on-off functions, the best way to do it is just with a simple Wi-Fi timer like this. So this is one we've used for a long time. It's from Wion. It works, it's weatherproof, it's great outdoors. There's literally tons of models out there that you can use. We just use this one because this is what we know, and we haven't had a lot of issues with it. But basically all we've done is we've taken just a standard transformer that all it has is a simple on-off switch inside here that you flick on or off. And to bypass that, instead of putting like a photocell where now, we got to be conscious of where we're putting that transformer so it's not in the shade, so our lights don't come on too early, what we've done is, two ways you can do this. One is we've basically just taken our Wi-Fi timer, we've plugged it into our outlet, and then we've plugged our transformer into there. Sometimes the reason I like doing that is just because when you put these little things inside the box, which I'll show you, the Wi-Fi signal isn't as strong. It's sometimes cause some issues. But if you want to put it inside, it's pretty easy. You'll see the transformers and any of the good ones that you'll buy, not the Malibu or Moonrays or Hampton Bay or any of those garbage ones, but a good solid stainless steel one is going to have a setup like this, where you have an on-off switch, and then you've got this little plug in here. And all you basically have to do is take this plug out, and you plug your timer into there, and then you plug this back into there, and then all of a sudden that's inside, but this operates as what it would be like a photocell. And all this is, if you had any kind of old timer or photocell, it basically plugs into this kind of thing too. So that's how you make your system a Wi-Fi. And it doesn't matter if you have a smart home system and they make a compatible outdoor outlet, then just use that. If you have you're plugging on a Wi-Fi switch already that's inside the house, well, then you don't even need that, because basically you can just plug this in, leave it in the on position, and then you control everything from whatever your smart home system is. And the reason I say that's a cost-effective way is because now if you want to do the front and the back, it's typically going to be cheaper for you just to get 2 transformers, 2 smart devices, and have a front and a back zone, as opposed to going and buying one of the programmable zoning ones. And not that I've got one in my house. I get my stuff at cost, so I don't mind paying for it. But I know that a lot of you, and even myself, if I had to pay full price, I might not be paying for that zoning option. Because realistically, it's not something that we use a whole ton in a much more affordable way. Simple transformer, Wi-Fi timer, and you're set. All right, guys, so we're just installing the last couple lights here. So First step when you're installing landscape lights is really just choose the fixtures and stuff that you're going to use. I mean, in this case, we've got some wash lights, we've got some up lights, and we've got some path lights. Determine, based on how many lights you're going to use, what size transformer you need. And they usually say go and mount that first so you can get ready to test everything before you bury it. Second step is we just run all our wire out above ground so we know we have enough. I'm going to go and I'm going to leave loops of extra wire at every single light, so that way I know I have room to cut into it, I know I have room to move that light. So always leave extra wire, but that's your second step. Just go and run all your wire from your transformer to each light so that you know you have enough. The next step is setting your lights, and that's what we're going to do here, and then we'll get into wiring it. And before I go wire anything, usually what I do is I'll just get my lights set up. I've got my wire run already. Some of this is already buried just because we have some hardscapes we have to go under, but basically I'm just going to dig myself a little hole so I have room for my fixture, as well as I'm going to have room for some extra wire and stuff. So we're going to use our trusty mallet. We're going to take our very solid ground stake and we're just going to pound that into the ground. So that way we can make sure we get it nice and secure. From there, we're just going to go and screw our light in. Now we're going to get that pointed the way we want. So we're going to have that featuring this wall here. And then from there, what we're going to go do is bury it. But I like to get all my lights set first so that then I can just go and I can bury one at a time. And a good rule of thumb is that as you go around wiring, especially if you're new to this, that's why I say have your transformer set up already. And if you have your main wire wired in, even if nothing's buried yet, at least if you're not sure yourself, you can go and flick on your transformer and you can test that you've wired those lights properly. So that's why I always like to be able to test it before I bury anything and make anything permanent. But step 3, just go around and set all your lights. Alright, so our next step is wiring our lights. So in this case, we've got a wire coming from our last light, it's coming to this fixture, and then we got to go to the last light on the line. So what's going to happen is we've got our wire coming in, and I'm going to recommend 12 2 low voltage cable for any of your do-it-yourself projects. You're going to ensure that you don't have any voltage drop and that you leave yourself room for expansion. So we've got our wire coming from our last light, and then we've got our wire that's going to be going out to our next light. And then we've got our wire from our fixtures here. So we've got our 2 wires coming from our fixture. So now what we're going to use for this one is we're going to use our BBS2 connectors, our snap block connectors that are gel filled. We're going to use those to wire it in. So how we go and do that is, so our 12-2 comes basically together. We're going to split that. We're going to strip the ends of that. Just clean that up a bit. Okay, so we've got that clean. We're going to take our wire that's going to the next light. We're going to strip both of the ends of that wire. So basically we're working with 4 wires so far. And then we're going to have our fixture wire. We're going to have 2 of those. It's usually a smaller wire. It's usually a 16 or 18 gauge. And do the same thing. We're going to strip those. And now we're ready to go wire this. So how we go do that with these connectors, if you look closely on the bottoms, there's 3 terminals, 3 ports, 2 larger ones for our 12 gauge wire and 1 smaller one for our 16 or 18 gauge wires. So what's going to happen is every light from our last fixture, we're going to split this wire, and one of the wires is going to go into one of the larger ports. And then we have our wire that's going to our next fixture. One of those wires is going to go into the larger ports. And then lastly, we've got our 2 wires from our fixture. One of those is going to go into this port, into the smaller port. So we're going to put that in, and then we just snap it tight, and voila, we're good to go. Something I like to do after I'm done both my connections is either wrap it in electrical tape, a zip tie, something like that that just helps keep it from pulling apart. Although these do a good job, you can never be too careful. So we're not quite done yet because that's only half of it, because now We've still got one of our wires coming from our last fixture that we're going to throw again in the larger terminal. We've got our wire that is going to our next fixture, our 12 gauge going to our next fixture. That's going to go into the other large port. And then lastly, we've got our other wire from our fixture that's going to go into the smaller terminal. I'm going to push that up there in our gel-filled BBS2 connectors, snap that closed, and we're all done. And that's basically how you go and wire your lights in line. You can daisy chain those, whatever makes your life easier. Then what I do is I usually go and just wrap up all my wires. Same thing, usually this is where I'll throw a zip tie or tape or something around them. I stuff them down there, and then I leave it as is, and I move on to my next light because I don't want to bury this yet, because I want to test everything first before I go and make everything permanent and buried so I can't check it later, because if I did make a mistake, I want to be able to access that pretty easily. Hey guys, Cal from the Lighting Doctor here. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy these low voltage landscape lighting tips. Please be sure to check us out on YouTube for lots more videos.